William, our future king, has surfaced details about Camilla's past that have left those closest to Charles stunned into silence. Specific documented truths about who Camilla was long before she became queen consort. Charles has been left with nowhere to turn, and the question now everybody's asking is simple. Who was Camilla before becoming a queen? Now, to understand her past, we quickly need to understand her youth. Camilla grew up in the upper-class circles of 1960s Britain, a world of country houses, hunt balls, and almost no accountability. She was charming, quick-witted, and socially fearless, but she was also someone who played by entirely her own rules. Long before Charles ever placed a ring on her finger, Camilla moved through London's elite social scene with a freedom that was, even by the standards of the time, remarkable. She was introduced to Charles in 1970, but what is rarely discussed is what her life looked like in the years surrounding that introduction. She had already been involved with Andrew Parker Bowles, the man she would go on to marry in 1973, but that relationship was far from exclusive. Parker Bowles himself was known for conducting affairs throughout their courtship and marriage, and Camilla, according to multiple accounts from that social circle, was no passive bystander. She was an active participant in a world where fidelity was considered optional and social connections were everything. What makes this particularly significant is the overlap. While Camilla was involved with Charles in the early 1970s, she was simultaneously maintaining her relationship with Parker Bowles, and Charles, famously devoted, believed he had found something real. He was sent away on naval duty in 1973. By the time he returned, Camilla had married someone else. The official narrative has always framed this as a tragic missed connection, two people pulled apart by duty and circumstance, but sources close to that era paint a considerably more complicated picture. Camilla, it is said, was never intending to wait. She had calculated, even then, that Parker Bowles offered something Charles could not, a life outside the suffocating walls of royal protocol. But then there is the matter of what came after. Even during her marriage to Parker Bowles, Camilla maintained her connection to Charles. Their affair, which is now openly acknowledged, reportedly resumed as early as 1980, just 7 years into her marriage, and well before Charles had even proposed to Diana. What has never been fully explored publicly is the extent of Camilla's social life during this period. She moved in circles that included some of the most powerful and most controversial figures in British aristocratic life, parties at country estates where the guest lists were never made public, social gatherings that operated under a strict, unspoken code of silence, relationships and alliances that were about influence as much as friendship. The palace has always been content to let this chapter of Camilla's life remain vague. Vague is safe. Vague is manageable. Vague does not require explanations. But William, it appears, has been paying attention, and unlike his father, who has always chosen to see Camilla through the lens of love, William has been looking at the full picture, the picture that existed long before Charles ever became king, and what he has reportedly found is not vague at all. But this is where the story takes a turn that no one inside the palace was prepared for, because William did not stumble across this information by accident. According to sources familiar with the situation, William has been quietly assembling a clearer picture of Camilla's past for some time now, not out of malice, not out of grief, but out of something far more calculated, a sense of duty to the institution he is preparing to lead. What reportedly came to William's attention were accounts and documented details that had been carefully kept out of public circulation for decades. Some of it relates to Camilla's social connections during the 1970s and 1980s, specifically her proximity to figures whose reputations have not aged well. Britain's aristocratic social scene during that era was not simply glamorous. It was, in certain corners, deeply compromised. There were individuals within those circles who would later face serious allegations, individuals whose names appear in investigations that the British establishment has consistently tried to manage, minimize, and move past as quickly as possible. Camilla was not accused of wrongdoing, but her proximity to certain people, her presence at certain gatherings, is, according to those who have looked closely, more than incidental. Then there is the matter of her relationship with the press. Long before she became a sympathetic figure in the public eye, Camilla had cultivated relationships with specific newspaper editors and journalists. This was not unusual for someone of her social standing, but the nature of some of those relationships, the access she provided, the stories she allegedly shaped or suppressed, tells a story about a woman who understood power and how to use it. William, who has spent years watching the press operate against his own family, understands this dynamic better than almost anyone, and he has reportedly not taken it lightly. There are also accounts relating to the period immediately before and after Diana's death, specifically the way certain narratives were managed, the way Camilla's public rehabilitation was carefully orchestrated, and who helped orchestrate it. Sources suggest that William has become increasingly focused on understanding not just what happened to his mother, but how the machinery around his father's relationship with Camilla operated during those critical years, what stories were killed, what sources were managed, what the public was never allowed to know. This is not a son consumed by anger. This is a future king conducting what amounts to a private audit of the woman who now sits beside his father on the throne. And the conclusions he has reportedly drawn have fundamentally changed the dynamic inside the palace. Charles has been made aware of what William knows, not through a confrontation, not through a formal conversation, but through the quiet, unmistakable language of a son who no longer pretends he does not see what he sees. The message was clear, even without a press conference, and Charles, for perhaps the first time in his marriage to Camilla, has been left without a comfortable answer. But to understand what is truly driving William, you have to go back to a shadow that has never left him, Diana. Not Diana as a symbol, not Diana as a cultural icon, but Diana as his mother, the woman he last saw when he was 15 years old, and whose absence has quietly shaped every decision he has made since. William has never fully separated Camilla from what happened to Diana. That is not speculation. It is something that has been acknowledged in carefully worded terms by people who have spent time close to the Prince of Wales over the years. The public version of William is measured, controlled, and forward-looking, but privately, the wounds from his parents' marriage and its catastrophic unraveling have never fully closed, and Camilla sits at the center of that unraveling. What is less understood publicly is the specific nature of William's grievances. This is not simply about the affair. William is old enough and informed enough to understand that his parents' marriage was complicated long before Camilla became a fixture in it. What William has struggled with, and what has reportedly intensified as he has gotten older, is the way the narrative was managed, the way Diana was systematically undermined, the way her mental health struggles were used against her, the way her relationships with the press were weaponized, the way she was made to look unstable, while those around her, including Camilla, were quietly repositioned as the reasonable parties. William watched his mother fight a machine, and now he understands, with adult clarity, exactly how that machine operated. The rehabilitation of Camilla did not happen organically. It was a project, deliberate, coordinated, and funded by the kind of establishment relationships that Camilla had spent decades cultivating. The same relationships, sources suggest, that William has now been examining more closely. There is also the matter of what Diana knew, and what she said. Diana gave interviews, she kept notes, she confided in friends who have since spoken publicly, and the picture she painted of her marriage, of feeling deliberately isolated, of being made to feel mad, of watching Camilla's influence operate in ways she could never fully prove, has stayed with William. He was a child when he watched that happen. He is now a grown man, with access to information his mother never had, and he is, by all accounts, using it. What makes this moment different from William's previous, quieter tensions with Camilla is the shift from emotional grievance to documented concern. Grief can be managed. Grief can be counseled away. Grief can be reframed as part of a healing process. But evidence is different. Evidence does not respond to therapy or time or carefully worded palace statements. And William, it appears, has moved from one to the other. The Diana shadow has not faded. It has simply found a sharper focus. And while William has been quietly building his case, Camilla herself has not been standing still. Those who have watched her closely over the past 2 years describe a woman who is acutely aware that her position is less secure than the palace projects. Because here is what the official narrative does not tell you. Camilla's title, Queen Consort, was never the inevitable outcome it is now presented as. As recently as 2005, when Charles and Camilla married, the official palace position was that Camilla would become Princess Consort upon Charles's accession, not Queen, not an equal partner in the crown. A carefully managed, slightly lesser title designed to acknowledge public sentiment about Diana. That position changed, quietly and without much public debate, in the years that followed. By the time Charles became king in September 2022, Camilla was Queen Consort. The shift was presented as natural, inevitable, a reflection of how far public opinion had moved. But sources familiar with palace dynamics suggest it was also something else, a decision made before the full picture of William's concerns had crystallized. And now, with William's position becoming clearer, questions are being asked behind closed doors about whether that title carries the security Camilla believes it does. A queen consort's role is not constitutionally protected in the way a monarch's position is. It exists at the pleasure of the reigning sovereign, and crucially, at the tolerance of the heir. William cannot strip Camilla of her title while Charles is alive, but he can, and reportedly is, making clear that his own court will operate very differently. Sources suggest that William has already begun quietly signaling to key figures in the royal household that Camilla's influence over institutional decisions will not carry into the next reign. This is not a declaration of war. It is something more unsettling, a calm, deliberate drawing of boundaries by a man who knows exactly where the power is heading. Camilla, for her part, has responded in the only way available to her. She has doubled down on visibility, more public engagements, more carefully managed press appearances, more positioning as an indispensable part of the working monarchy. The message is clear, even if it is never stated directly. I am here, I am useful, I am not going anywhere. But those who know William describe a man who is entirely unmoved by optics. He has watched optics be used as a weapon his entire life. He is not susceptible to them. What he responds to is something far simpler and far more demanding: integrity, accountability, a clear-eyed view of what the monarchy needs to be in order to survive the next 50 years. And by those measures, sources suggest Camilla is failing his test. Not loudly, not dramatically, but failing nonetheless. And in a world where William is the future, failing his test is the only test that ultimately matters. And so we arrive at the question that everyone inside the palace is now quietly circling. What does William actually want? Because this is not, at its core, about Camilla's past. It is not about reopening old wounds or settling scores on behalf of a mother who has been gone for nearly 30 years. William is too strategic for that, too disciplined, too aware of what reckless personal grievance can do to a monarchy already fighting for relevance. What William wants, what he has been methodically working toward, is something far more significant. He wants to redefine what the monarchy is. And to do that, he has to be honest, at least privately, about what it has been. The British monarchy has survived for centuries, not because it has been morally consistent, but because it has been institutionally adaptable. It has absorbed scandals, reframed failures, and managed public perception with a sophistication that most political operations can only envy. But William does not believe that model is sustainable in the modern world. He has watched it crack under the weight of Harry and Meghan's departure. He has watched it struggle under the scrutiny of a more skeptical, more diverse, more demanding public. He has watched his father's reign begin under the shadow of questions that were never properly answered, and he has concluded that the only way forward is a monarchy built on something more durable than managed perception. That conviction is what makes his position on Camilla so significant, because Camilla, in William's framework, represents exactly the kind of figure the new monarchy cannot afford, not because she is a bad person, but because she is a product of a system, the old system, that operated on the assumption that the public did not need to know, could not handle the truth, and would ultimately accept whatever version of events the palace chose to present. William does not believe that anymore, and the line he is drawing is not just about Camilla. It is about every figure, every relationship, every institutional habit that belongs to that old way of operating. Camilla is simply the most visible example, the most consequential one. Sources close to William describe a prince who has been preparing for kingship with an intensity that goes beyond the ceremonial. He has been studying constitutional history. He has been meeting quietly with figures outside the traditional royal circle, reformers, historians, communication strategists who understand the modern media landscape. He has been building, slowly and deliberately, a vision of what the House of Windsor needs to look like in 20 years. And in that vision, the ghosts of the old palace, the cover-ups, the managed silences, the relationships built on aristocratic loyalty rather than merit, have no place. What William has done, in surfacing what he knows about Camilla, is not an act of revenge. It is an act of governance, a signal sent through the quiet but unmistakable language of royal power that the next reign will not simply be a continuation of this one. Charles may be speechless, but William is not waiting for a response. He is already building what comes next, and the palace, for all its centuries of experience managing difficult moments, has never quite had to manage this. A future king who has decided that transparency, not silence, is the only foundation worth building on. The line has been drawn. The only question now is who, inside those palace walls, is willing to stand on the right side of it. What we are witnessing inside the British royal family is not a family argument. It is a constitutional reckoning. William is not acting out of emotion. He is acting out of vision. And Camilla, whatever her title, whatever her public standing, is now navigating a palace landscape in which the most powerful person is no longer her husband. It is her stepson, a stepson who has done his homework, who has drawn his conclusions, and who is, quietly but unmistakably, already governing as if the next reign has begun. What do you think? Is William right to draw this line? Is Camilla's past relevant to her role as queen consort? And is Charles capable of confronting the uncomfortable truth that his heir is no longer willing to look away? Let me know in the comments below.